sound. And we have sound and video. Hi, Tyler.
How you doing?
Okay. I'm Lucy Beard. I'm the director here at the Alice Paul Institute. And they put me on camera so Tane can be busy in the background working to get everyone online. And there's always a challenge one way or another. But welcome. We're glad to have you here.
Oh, good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Tyler is a high school teacher. Is that right?
Yeah.
I have that right? High school teacher in what town in Tennessee?
Lenore City. It's a stone's throw from Knoxville.
Right. Lenore City.
Big orange country.
Yes. Yeah. I've been there. And he's just hot off of parent-teacher conferences, I think. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much for coming. I'm sure you're exhausted. There's long days for teachers these days. But Tyler is the author of this book. I want to make sure you can see it. Tennessee Statesman Harry T. Burn, Women's Suffrage, Free Elections, and a Life of Service. And I'm going to let you take it away, Tyler, because I know that you have prepared remarks, and I don't want to, but hopefully we'll have some time for questions afterwards. And to our audience, please write your questions. You'll see on your screen a Q&A. Please put a question in there, and we will try to get on it if we can before time's up. So Tyler, let me hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. It's good to see some people here from, of course, New Jersey. And there's someone from Jackson, someone from California, someone that went to school in Farragut, which is where I'm at right now, actually. Pennsylvania, Maine, New York. Very good. Okay, Boston. Yeah, I was catching up on those messages. Okay. All right. So yeah, we're definitely East Coast over here. So
with a few California.
All right. Now, can you guys see my PowerPoint here?
Not yet.
Okay, I'll try to get that working. If not, I can still talk. But I'll go to
the old word pictures,
slides, and see if that lets me do anything.
You see up at the start sharing screen in the purple line. Did you see that? Screen says, yeah.
Okay, that's different. Okay, yeah, I'll go to.
Yeah, each one is just a little bit different so that they can think that they're original.
Yes, only share with sites I trust. Okay. Now, can you see it now?
Not yet. It's coming, we think. There it is. Yep.
Okay, very good. Now my PowerPoint's not. Okay, here we go. All right.
There you
go. Okay, thank you guys for having me. One of my best friends lives in New Jersey. He actually works at a Amazon fulfillment center. I don't know how many there are in the state, but it's in South Jersey. I know that. So
yeah, in Flemington, it's not, or in Florence. It's not far from us at all. It's huge.
Okay,
it's an enormous building.
Yeah, he was actually just here visiting last week for the first time in a while. So it was good to see him. So, All right. Well, last year I published my first book, the first of hopefully many. I've got another one in the pipeline, but Tennessee Statesman Harry T. Burn. And you'll see behind me Nyota Depot, which plays a big part in this story. It's the oldest train depot in all of Tennessee, and one of the 10 oldest in the entire country. And it was built in 1854. Okay, now I'll get to my connection to Harry if I press the correct button here. Okay, can you guys see Harry's parents?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, Harry's father on the left, James Lafayette Burn, he went by Jim or by JL. I prefer Jim. He was son of, the nephew of fallen Union soldiers in a staunch Republican family. And then Harry's mother, Febb Burn, was the daughter of a disabled Confederate veteran in a family of, to quote Harry Jr., unreconstructed Democrats, which would get a lot of history professors down here are really, really going. So to explain that one. But I love the fact that these two come from such incredibly different backgrounds, after the Civil War, and they get married in 1894, and they go on to raise their son who does something so great to help make this country better after such a horrible war where 500,000 Americans died. So
Yeah.
Okay, now
Look at
you
him.
have to excuse the bows there. They kind of take away from the face, but this is Harry on the left. Can you guys see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. Yeah.
that's Harry on the left, and there's Jack. Now, Jack is my great grandfather. So this is probably from 1900. So Harry would have been about 5, and Jack would have been about 3. And there were 2 girls, Sarah, who passed away at age 11, and Otha, Otho. She didn't have any children. So Harry had Harry Jr., who was an old bachelor. So all of Harry and Febb Burn's descendants come from this little guy right here, Jack Burn. So. Okay, now I don't have a lot of text here, but I do want to have a few slides just to kind of set this up here. So as you guys probably know, Harry T. Burn is known for casting the deciding vote in Tennessee legislature to ratify the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, enfranchising, recognizing, but not giving millions of women the right to vote all across the country. He's from Niota in McMinn County, which is equidistant from Knoxville and Chattanooga in East Tennessee, about 3 hours from Atlanta. And was the youngest member of the Tennessee legislature at the time, age 24, almost 25. And I'm sure you know about his mother, Febb Burn, sending him a letter asking him, notice I'm saying asking him to vote for suffrage. I wrote this book for a lot of reasons. I wanted to help celebrate the anniversary, and I wanted to tell about the rest of his life, which was just really starting in 1920 because he was so young. But I wanted to debunk all the myths, all the apocryphal stories that kind of took on a life of their own. So, myth number 1, he was against suffrage, like literally against suffrage in his heart, and he had been voting no on the actual resolution. And then along comes mom, and she admonishes and browbeats him, you better change your vote or you don't bother coming home. And then the one I think that's the most fun of all, which I kind of wish was true only because it's so interesting, but it's just not true, is fearing for his life. He was chased by an angry mob out of the state capitol. Down the street, running for his life because he changed his vote. And there's elements of truth to all these, but none of it was true. So. Now, Alice Paul, as you all know, in the National Women's Party, they were a little different than Carrie Chapman Catt and the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Both played their part. So Alice Paul and the suffragists are depicted here in front of Woodrow Wilson's White House during World War I. And of course, you have Woodrow Wilson all about the make the world safe for democracy, fighting in World War I. Pretty controversial. We have a draft, and why are we dying for this people on another continent for their democracy when us women can't even vote here? So this really helps set up this amendment to even be ratified because people are seeing how unfair this is. So while this is going on, Harry, and I think Harry right here is probably in his early 20s, maybe late teens. He's working for the railroad. Now, my author photo is taken on the other side of this depot. Now, can you guys see this little boy here?
Mm-hmm.
That's not Harry. That's actually Jack. Harry's not in this picture, and that's why we like it, because this is the quintessential Niota picture, and since he gets enough attention as the Niota, golden boy, we really like this one because it has other Niotans in it, but it's Harry's granddad, brother, uncle, dad, some guy we don't know, and his other uncle by marriage right here. So it's Burn family biased, but he's working on the railroad during World War I. So he's actually not serving in combat, and they actually tried to use that against him when he ran for re-election, saying he was a draft dodger. Well, no. He was playing his part, just like a lot of the women did, replacing their husbands and sons and fathers, working at home, making war supplies and stuff. He's working on the railroad. He's playing his part. So that's what's going on in the late teens. He's working all along the Southern Railway line from Bristol, Tennessee, which is on the border of Virginia, for those of you that don't know, all the way down to Dalton, Georgia, just below Chattanooga. Now, 1916, Harry's father passed away of a fever, typhoid fever. and his sister had died 2 years before. So it's just Febb and the 3 surviving kids, and 2 of them are adults, Harry and Jack. So Harry runs for office at age 22, and I love this card right here. Imagine a politician today saying your vote and influence is solicited. You know, they're like, "Ew, what are you talking about?" Well, this is back in the old days when people could get away with saying things like that because, you know, that's how they talked back then. You know, things have changed. Just like when they say, I'm out canvassing for votes. Oh, canvassing for votes. Oh, you mean out campaigning and door knocking? Okay, I see. So he runs and he's elected 1 week before he turns 23. And this is, of course, from the cover of my book. Now, this is a poor quality, but this is one of his campaign posters that has been preserved at a museum in Knoxville. It's not in very good shape, but I'm glad they at least have a copy. But think about this: 3-year college, or excuse me, 3-year high school diploma, no college. You know, middle class family, upper middle class at best. Not a lot of name recognition like Kennedy or back then Roosevelt. You know, whoever, Taft, Lincoln, what have you. But he runs for office. He gets involved, and he's serving in local government, which has a big impact on our lives. And he finds himself able to vote for an amendment to change half the country. It's an incredible story of luck. Now I'll do a quick summary of where the country was before the amendment was ratified. So thanks to the fact that our founders put in the Constitution the ability for states to make voting qualifications. Now, does that have drawbacks? Of course it does. You know, it's been abused, and it still gets abused some today. But I'm really, really glad it's not done by the federal government, because imagine what would have happened if they gave the federal government here in Washington the ability to make voter qualifications. Think about what's going to happen to all the slave states down here. They're going to dominate. So Wyoming starts out ahead as a territory, recognizing the right to vote in 1869, and the rest of the West gets on board, and you can see what part of the country is kind of slow to get on board with this. All this is possible because the state governments have the right to make these voter qualifications and have these gradual progress to set this amendment up, but we know it's not going to happen gradually, state by state. It'd take too long. It never happens. It's got to be a federal amendment. So in June 1919, they finally proposed the amendment, and it gets 35 states within 9 months. It gets all the states out here in the West. It gets a lot of the states in the Midwest. And, of course, the Deep South isn't going to go for it. Texas did. That's about it. And Tennessee, as you can see, it's kind of in the middle. It's upper South, so it's not quite like Alabama, but it's also not like, Michigan either. It's kind of in between. And they had limited suffrage, but they weren't sure if they could count on Tennessee. Well, in August 1920, they've got really about 2 or 3 states left. They got Tennessee, North Carolina, and I think they have Connecticut, who's out of session. So if those states don't pass it, this thing isn't going to pass in 1920. Women can't vote for the new president for the Roaring '20s. It's now or never. Harry leaves for Nashville planning to vote for this amendment. He even tells his mother that I believe in suffrage. Well, he gets over there and things all of a sudden change. He gets all sorts of telegrams, dozens upon dozens of telegrams, and they're lying to him. They're about half and half on, vote for suffrage and vote against it, but his most prominent constituents is who he's paying attention to, the prominent McMinn County politicians and leaders. To give you an example of the pressure he was under, the McMinn County Republican Party chairman told him right here, 90% of your friends, the people of McMinn County, expect you to vote against ratification. And then we'll look over here at Owen, D.M. Owen. He was a Democrat and the chairman of the election commission in McMinn County, because at the time, Tennessee was a Democratic state and they controlled election commissions. The women and men of McMinn County are almost unanimously against suffrage amendment. Will you not represent them and not Wilson and those northern lobbyists? Even the county judge says, I dismissed court. We had an indignation meeting and they're all right up. You need to find a way out of this, So he's thinking, well, the prominent guys in both of the parties are telling me I got to vote against this thing. I don't want to get voted out. So that's when he starts to sort of hang out and caucus and buddy with all the Red Rose Brigade, all the anti-suffragists. Thankfully, his mother takes care of that. There's a bitter speech given by his mentor, Herschel Candler, state senator from Athens, which is where I'm from. See, in McMinn County, between Knoxville and Chattanooga, McMinn County, Athens is the county seat, and Nyota is about 3 miles north. It's really small. Well, in Athens, Candler was Mr. Athens. He's very influential, and he gave a speech in the state Senate against suffrage. He used some pretty racist and sexist language. Back then, it didn't really turn a lot of heads, and now, of course, it gets you around town, as it should. Well, she reads it in the newspapers, and she's very disappointed to hear her senator say these things. She's also wondering, well, he may have an influence on Harry. So, and she knows Harry knows what to do, but just in case he needs a nudge, just in case he's a little confused on what to do with all these lobbyists telling him to do one thing and this guy telling him to do another thing, I need to help him out here. So she writes him a letter. This home is where she writes this letter. The home looks different now. If you guys see the porch right here, Harry had to put his mark on it. He had to go larger than life. He added these real tall columns in the 1950s. They actually go up to here, almost to the gutters, and like a portico. And I wish it looked like this. I think this is a better look. She was sitting on the porch right here when she wrote the letter. This is an antebellum home, bricks built by slaves, built 1849, and it's still there. It's
Uh-oh. Oh, Tyler, we can't hear you. No. Can people hear me? If you could just put in the chat whether or not you can hear me, then we'll know if the problem is on his end or if there's something going on here. Okay. So the problem is on his end. Thank you, everyone. This I really appreciate. We're all on the tech team together tonight. This is just really getting good too. He's a fun speaker. Okay. Oh, he bounced off. Oh, gosh darn it. If you will just indulge us, we will try to see if he can reconnect. Maybe Tane can give him a call and see if he's even aware that he's frozen. Yeah. One of the things they talk about in the book is how many telegrams he got from his home district, and that the people, it was really even, yes, vote for it, no, don't you dare vote for it. And he was really torn. And then he was getting telegrams from the National Party, the National Republican Party, saying you better do right. And I think this is him calling us probably. And they were really, this was a young guy under a lot of pressure. He is trying to call in on the phone now. So, and we can potentially share his slideshow. I'm not sure, but they are working on it. So yeah, we'll tell him where he left off, believe me. This takes so much patience, and I really appreciate all of you. I'm really feeling like this is my tribe tonight, sharing my pain with me. But yes, Dr. Rosechild, it does definitely, constituent emails and calls matter. That's something we know here. We have regular advocacy events here where we send ERA, Equal Rights Amendment postcards to congressional members, urging them to vote for it. But also we send, our Girls Leadership Council will send postcards thanking those who do support it. And it's important for them to hear that we like what you've had as well. Well, Rachel Maddow has had to have guests call in, so I'm in good company then, huh? And I'll take the reference to Rachel Maddow. Thank you very much. Just teasing. He's working it, but now we're concerned his internet has, 1 second, sorry. stay tuned. Yeah, we think he's getting back on. He and Tane are working it very hard. But if you have not seen it, I urge you to go to the website PopVox, POPVOX. I think it's .com. I could be wrong about that. It is, you can look up any bill on there and go, and it will take you to a page about the bill, who sponsored it and who co-sponsors it. And you can find, if you put in your district, you can find what your congressional representative is doing and what they're sponsoring and what they're not sponsoring. And really, they only want to hear from their own constituents. As much as we want to tell all of them what we think, the ones they listen to are the people from their own, who vote for them. They're from their own state or their own congressional district. But PopVox is a great source of information on what they are or are not supporting, and you can communicate with them there. So I highly recommend PopVox. I've gotten replies on it and found it really useful. And the same goes at the state level. They would need to know what their constituents are thinking. Otherwise, they only hear what they're told when at an event they go to, and that's just whatever that particular person's individual. Oh my goodness, we have the mother of the founder of PopVox online. That's amazing. And it is .com, popvox.com, and her mom's here and she endorses it. So thank you for telling us that, Diane. That's really funny, but it's a great site. Tell her thank you from the Alice Paul Institute. We use it as often as we can. And it is how I keep up with what the New Jersey legislature and legislative delegation is doing in the state. How's he doing, Tane?
Getting back up.
Okay, he is getting back up. So we will just give him another minute. Oh. But yes, Gail says a lot don't take emails out of their area. That's very true. They don't. They don't even bother opening them, we found. So yes, Congressional Quarterly tracks legislation. That's true. And you can automate a letter through that. That is true. But
the other thing I could try is I can actually share my screen.
Yeah, we're going to see if maybe we're trying to work around now to see if maybe we can share his slides through this, and if need be, we'll hold the phone up to the speaker or something. But I know we're all watching our watches. The debate is at, I think it's at 9 Eastern time tonight. But someone's going to correct me if I've got that wrong. It's a kind of I'm not the only person who's nervous on a screen right now. I know two men who are very nervous right now. They're earning their keep tonight. But we have ideas here for creating a bingo card for some of the debates. Thanks, Gail. It's at 9 Eastern time tonight. We'd like to create a bingo card for the vice presidential debate next week. About just what's going to get mentioned. How many times will Mike Pence use the word family, and how many times will Kamala Harris say something about justice or whatever, but we're going to send some suggestions out, and we're crowdsourcing this bingo card. So if you all have ideas on what should be on the vice presidential debate bingo card, please send them in. We're all ears. I'm going to go ahead while we're doing this and tell you about an upcoming program we have. Of course, now that you get your books on Kindle, you don't have a great book always to pick up. So I printed out a copy of the cover. It's called All Stirred Up: Suffrage Cookbooks, Food, and the Battle for Women's Right to Vote. The author is Laura Kumin, and she has an online she has a website where she does videos giving cooking advice, actually. And she's all about working with people who aren't cooks and just teaching them. It's called Your Mother Would Know is the website, yourmotherwouldknow.com. And she loves aiming her lessons at young, non-cooking, they're Gen Xers now, I guess, or Gen Z, trying to teach them some basic skills so they can cook for themselves. But she's got this great, I have the book on Kindle. The first 30 pages are a timeline talking about what happened in this decade from 1848 up till 1920, what was happening, generally in a 10-year span, maybe 5 years, what was happening in the world, what was happening in the suffrage struggle, and then what was happening in the food world. So like the year the rotary egg beater was patented and started selling, or the year, there's some of the cooking stuff, the first frozen food, the first canned food. And they didn't invent the can opener for a couple of years after canned food. So canned food was out on the market, but people didn't have it in their homes because it wasn't easy to open a can. And then it just skyrocketed once they invented the can opener. So necessity really is the mother of invention. And one thing I found really interesting, I think it was 1890, Mississippi, the state of Mississippi passed a voter bill that you had to take a literacy test, but you could not vote if you did not have a grandparent or an ancestor that could, before 1866, who could vote. In other words, if you were a Black man, you couldn't vote. And we already knew no woman could vote. But I thought that was rich. That's been part of her timeline. I thought that was really interesting. But the free space in the middle of our bingo card should be where Mother Pence sits. Sorry, I'm supposed to be nonpartisan, but that's pretty good. Anyway, this is all stirred up as a program on Saturday, October 10th at 4 p.m. So please join us. She's a hoot. She's a lot of fun and a great speaker. She's an attorney by career, but she stopped being a lawyer about 10 years ago and has been focusing on cooking and cookbooks. But this really sparked her interest in the suffrage movement and got her research skills. She spent a year or two in libraries studying the cookbooks and writing about it.
I shared the slideshow.
But okay, we are, I think, about to go to the share the slideshow, and he's going to call on the phone option here. But now they're trying to do that. I so apologize and thank all of you for your incredible patience on this. This is very frustrating to us all, and I can't believe you've waited like this, but we do appreciate it. This is, it's always an adventure, these online programs. But it's also so heartening to see people coming from different parts of the country, and people who wouldn't drive here to Paulsdale for a program are able to join us. And that's definitely, I say it every time, that's the upside to this incredibly raucous time we're living through and how we're all trying to get through it the best we can. But here at Paulsdale, we are now open for tours by reservation on Tuesdays and Fridays. We have college interns who volunteered. They wanted to lead tours, but we're keeping them, people socially distant, maintaining 6 feet. They must wear masks. We have sanitizer every 5 feet, I think. And we are in requiring reservations that people need to call and reserve for their tours. But if you are in the area and want to take a tour, please call us and come. In the meantime, we also have, we've developed a cell phone tour of the outside of the property that you can get out and dial in and listen to and walk the property to different stops and listen to information about the property, the farm that this was, the 200-acre farm, and the people who lived here. I was really pleased. We have a young woman who is our archives assistant, who is really learning on the job here, and she found some great images of the young Irish maid that lived here, and we found information about that young woman, and we have a picture of her that we share in the cell phone tour, and then pictures of some of the outbuildings that were here at one time. So that you can walk the farm and learn more about what happened here at Paulsdale when Alice was a girl. But, oh, thank you. You don't mind me chattering, Gail. That's great. but I've given up on frowning. It's gonna give me too many worry lines. I just laugh through this because what else can we do? We have to we have to keep our sense of humor about this stuff because it just keeps coming. After each one of these programs, Tane and I will look at each other and count the new gray hairs we got from that one, because it is just nerve-wracking to go through this every time there's something. But oh my. Well, yeah, our Girls Leadership Council is meeting here next week. Well, they're not meeting here, they're meeting online. This year we have 85, I think, girls participating in our Girls Leadership Council, and they haven't met in person. Some of them are returnees from former years, which is great. We have something like an 89% return rate on those girls who are eligible to returning. But this month they're discussing, I believe, the water crisis and how it impacts women around here and around the world. And that's the fun thing, that they're really interested in the international issues, but we like to connect it to what's going on here in America too, for them to understand that some of this stuff happens in their own backyard. I see comments here about Alice's nephew, the evil nephew Donald, we call him. Alice was the oldest of 4 children, and only the youngest in the family, her younger brother Parry, ever married. And he had one son, Donald, and that son never married or had children. So when Donald died in 1987, the family that started here in this house with Alice's birth was gone. But Donald was, when Alice was older and she officially retired from the National Woman's Party, and she moved to Connecticut to a home that she and her sister Helen had owned together and had been left to her in Helen's will. But within a year, I believe, of moving there, maybe a little more, she had a stroke. Yeah. And Donald came in, and she was infirm and unable to speak for a while or walk. And he installed her in a nursing home, which by all accounts was pretty substandard. And then he was living in her house in Ridgefield, Connecticut, and was getting rid of her stuff. He would not allow her any visitors initially. He said she would be embarrassed, and he was embarrassed for those radical women to be further sullying the family name. But somehow she did get a few visitors, and the people who worked at the nursing home were quite fond of her. And she did regain her speech over the next year, and could walk to some extent, but she was quite frail and elderly. She was 88, 89 years old. And news of this, it's a very interesting story, but news of this got reported somehow, even though she didn't have any visitors, got reported in the International Herald Tribune newspaper in Europe about American news. And this is where the story gets somewhat complicated, but when Alice Paul was living in Switzerland in 1939 to 41, she was working with the World Women's Party, and she lived in a rented villa on the shores of Lake Geneva. And she was there to work with the League of Nations, which was in session there. And the Holocaust was starting, and there were a lot of Jewish refugees living in the Geneva area. And by Swiss law, they were not allowed to be employed, and they were not allowed to have a lease or own property. And there was a woman who had, the family had to leave Germany after the husband had been taken during Kristallnacht, and he was held for, I think it was 2 weeks, maybe a month. And she was able to purchase him his freedom. In any case, I think we've got him back, and I'm going to leave it. That's called what we call a cliffhanger. Let's get back to Tyler and hear him, I hope. Do we have him on the phone?
We're waiting for him to call in.
Okay, he's going to call in on the phone. And then should I hold the phone up to the screen?
No, like he's done.
He dials into the website. Oh man, teach your grandma some technology here. So I can see his cursor. And
No, that's me.
Oh, that's okay. That's Dane. In any case, she helped to rescue this family who could not stay in Switzerland. And she then helped them. She took them in to her villa. It was a young family, young couple, and their 2 children. And she took them in at her villa, and then she worked the phones to get them visas to emigrate to the United States, which they did in 1940. 40, 41, don't quote me. And then they came and settled in South Jersey. And they stayed in touch with Alice Paul through the rest of her life, on and off, Christmas cards, holiday cards, that kind of thing. And then here she was in 1974, 75 in this nursing home in Connecticut, and pretty isolated. And it gets reported in the International Herald Tribune, and relatives of that family she had rescued read it. And they cut out the article and sent it to the relatives who then lived in Atco, New Jersey, or Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and said, she helped you at an important time, you need to help her. And that family went to the local Quaker meeting, which was Alice Paul's childhood Quaker church or meeting, and said, she's one of yours, shouldn't you help her? And the meeting passed the hat and paid for an ambulance to bring her from Ridgefield, Connecticut, down to Moorestown, New Jersey. And she spent the last year and a half of her life in the nursing home that had at one time, the building that the nursing home was had been a family farmhouse that her father had purchased for the land. And he had given or sold, I'm not sure which, the farmhouse to the Quaker meeting to create this nursing home. So she spent the last year of her life in a building that had once belonged to her parents, right on the edge of what would have been the Paulsdale farm. And there she entertained guests and lobbied for the ERA, and had a lively time for the last year and a half of her life. And one of the people on this webinar tonight, Lillian Crowley, met her during that time. And we're going to have to get Lillian to record at a time when we have a working camera to record her story about meeting Alice Paul, because she has a nice story. Most people tell the same thing, that she looks him in the eye and says, who's your congressional representative? And what's his record on the ERA? And she could very often tell you if you didn't. There's a question, what happened to the nephew after that? He was actually removed through a court action from some distant relatives in this area. He was removed as her trustee or guardian. He then had her stuff. He literally loaded it, unloaded her house, and she just had boxes and boxes of paper, most of them mimeographed copies of National Woman's Party documents. And he loaded it all into a storage unit in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. And then through the early 80s, after her death in 77, he started shopping it around to museums saying, hey, I've got this collection. And he wanted $1 million, and then he wanted $500,000. And he met the founders of our organization around 1986 and sat them down and told them, you girls really ought to buy this, which made the hair, the bristle. That then he died very suddenly of an untreated toe infection, believe it or not. So he died, and the things in the storage unit, he did not have a will, and those went up for auction. And luckily, some of the folks at those museums who he had been shopping it to heard about it, that it was going up for auction, and luckily, our founders, who were so amazingly good at networking, they knew these people, and the museum people called them and said, you really ought to try to save this collection. And these fearless women, the Alice Paul Institute founders, did it. And they went on a national fundraising campaign, and they went to the auction. Few people really understanding what was there, and they were able to get everything. It's partially a sign of not just how smart they were, but also how little knowledge there is about U.S. women's history and how few people would care at that time. They gave the collection, they gave the physical artifacts to the Smithsonian Institute, the Museum of American History at the Smithsonian, and the paper they gave to the Schlesinger Library. And at Radcliffe, now Harvard, and it's the Schlesinger Library of American Women's History. So they really were responsible in how they treated this collection. Things like a desk that Alice Paul owned that had been given to her by Susan B. Anthony's secretary, because she considered Alice Paul Susan B.'s heir. that went to the Smithsonian, and it goes out on display every couple of years. Many other physical things like that, some suffrage banners that she had been carrying them around with her all that time. Those went to the Smithsonian. The Schlesinger got the papers and got the her books, and they immediately went through it and gave back to the Alice Paul Institute some of the things they didn't want.
Can you guys hear me right now?
There he is.
Hey, sorry about that. This computer just went nuts.
Yeah, so, well, we're all getting used to that. So please continue your story.
Oh, sure. You guys have the Febb's letter up?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, she wrote down the letter on, you can see, small paper with a pencil because she didn't have any ink. And the letter is mostly just local chit-chat about things going on back home. You know, it's a very casual letter, but she works in her message on page 2 and page 6. So the next slide, it should have the letter, and it should have portions of the letter highlighted in yellow.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, on page 2, you can see she says, "Hoorah and vote for suffrage, and don't keep them in doubt. I noticed Chandler, it's actually Candler's speech. It was very bitter. I've been watching to see how you stood, but haven't seen anything yet." And on page 6, she says, "Don't forget to be a good boy and help Mrs. Cat with her rat." So she's the one that put rat in ratification.
Right.
And the local cartoon at the time showed Carrie Chapman Cat with a broom sweeping the words RAT into the rest of the word ification for ratification. And that was her, I guess, her sense of humor there. So now the next slide, you'll see the front of the envelope.
Yes.
Well, that is actually Jack Burns' handwriting, my great-grandfather. She was very strict about formalities, and she wanted to make sure the letter was properly addressed in ink. So he took it into town in Iota, and he addressed it. As you can see, no street address, no zip code, just Harry T. Burns, State Capitol, Nashville, H.T. Burns, State Capitol, Nashville, and it got to him. You may see the where it's postmarked. You may see in a circle it says August 17th, 2:30 a.m.
Yes.
Now that was mailed out on Monday, August 16th, and it arrived in Nashville Tuesday, August 17th, and on Wednesday, August 18th, the day of the vote. That's when Harry got the letter from a house page and delivered it to him on the steps of the Capitol. It didn't actually go to his hotel. He had checked out of his hotel to get some rest at a friend's house, so they got it to him. And now the next slide is it the Tennessee House Chamber with some women watching in the gallery? Okay.
Right.
I got to go to Nashville last month. I was invited to several things that day in Nashville, but the state legislature did a reenactment of the vote.
Oh, yeah.
And they had it actually live streamed, and it was pretty good. It was, of course, there were a lot of limitations because of the virus and everything, but it was pretty well done. And just imagine, 5 times as many suffragists wearing their, white outfits and having their banners packed into the gallery, rather than the different things they're having to do there, keeping their distance. So, Harry walks onto the floor, and they're watching him, and they see the red rose in his lapel, thinking, well, we just lost another one. This kid got, swindled by the antis again, probably got bribed or something, so we're beat. Well, they have the vote to table, and everyone's content to delay this thing. We're going to put this off to the next session. We're going to go home and get reelected. Everything will be fine. Well, we have a 48-48 tie both times. Harry's voting yes. He's content to put this thing off. Well, the speaker says, okay, enough games. We're going to have an actual vote on the amendment itself. And that's when he realized without me or without someone breaking ranks here, this thing's going to die. And my mother wants you to vote for it, so I'm going to do it. So on the third roll call, he votes yes. And you move on to the next slide, you'll see the ladies from last month in Nashville reenacting the celebration. Now, that picture right there doesn't do it justice because there's not enough people there, but just imagine, the pandemonium of all the suffragists in the gallery crowded up there draping their banners down and throwing roses in the air, and it's deafening. Carrie Chapman Catt could actually hear it from her hotel suite down the hill about a quarter mile away. That's how loud it was. And of course, Alice Paul back in Washington, there's a great picture of her where they put down that banner from the balcony of the WP headquarters, and it has all 36 stars that she knitted on there.
Right.
And she has she's toasting with that. I don't know if it's a martini glass or what it is. She has there, but
Right.
That's the big celebration Harry's a part of, and then that's when people think that the next slide happened. Now
we're having trouble advancing. There we go. Okay. There. Now we see Burns breaks the tie. I guess I can't see the words because my own picture's over it. And then the next slide.
Yeah, it should be the cartoon.
Now we're onto a telegram. Oh, there.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. Yeah, I didn't bring it up on my end because my computer was on.
No, we've got it.
Yeah.
Bob J. Smith. Yeah.
Yes. That telegram actually said that he was voting for suffrage and enrolled your name among the immortals, as if you'll never be gone because everyone's going to remember your name, which is obviously true. But that chase right there. Okay, so I'll try to summarize as best I can because both Harry Singer and Harry Jr. and the newspapers all give a different account, and it frustrates me to no end because why can't these guys get their story straight? But there's no evidence of a mob chase. See, the governor said, I'm worried about Burn. We need to protect him. So he told the sergeant at arms, you need to go watch him. Harry didn't like that. And Harry Jr. said, my dad did not want to be under house arrest. He hated the idea of being, sort of babysitted from people trying to hurt him. So he's like, I don't want to do this. So he leaves. He goes out the window. So that part's true. But there's no mob down there on the ground outside ready to, chop him up and like alligators getting ready to feed in a Indiana Jones movie, And there's also no one, out there people like sticking their hands out the window trying to get him, None of that happened. He goes out the window and he goes into the northwest corner of the building, shimmies along an 18-inch ledge and hides in the library. And when people think about the word hide, they think, oh, he's in danger. Well, his son says he left the building quietly. He says he left the building and the sergeant at arms found him again and chased him down to the Hermitage Hotel. And that was in a newspaper in a different day. It's a madness. It's everything that they say. But there's no evidence that he was ever in any danger. He never talked about it in his lifetime. His son denies it. Nothing contemporaneous can ever corroborate this story. So there's elements of truth in it, but he was never in danger by a mob. I mean, the people that were in danger were, the people that were protesting this for so long, like getting sent to prison just for having a banner in front of the White House. Harry was fortunate to play a small but crucial role in this entire story here. He's very fortunate. And now the next slide, is that the Immortals Banquet?
Yes.
Okay, I love that one. That quote right there, I don't know it verbatim, but you'll see that quote.
Right.
They had, I believe, all 49 of the state legislators from Tennessee who voted for suffrage. It was 49 to 47. They came to a banquet in Knoxville. I think it was somewhere downtown. And Lizzie Crozier French, who someone told me she was one of the only suffragists who had the respect of both the Alice Paul NWP wing and the Carrie Chapman Catt NALSA wing.
Right.
She could kind of, they both kind of sort of accepted her rather than she can kind of fit into both, sects there, if you will. She was there. She was a great Knoxville suffragist. She's actually buried in Old Gray Cemetery with Parson Brownlow, the great pro-union governor down here in Tennessee, Reconstruction. She was there, and Harry said, the recognition should belong to the women themselves. They're the ones that made this happen. I was fortunate to play a small role in making Tennessee the perfect 36th state. So I was glad to see him give credit where credit was due there. And now the next slide, what is on that one?
The bulleted list, women in suffrage, all there.
Okay. Yes. So this is near the end, and I'm going to have them play the video for you. I think you guys will really enjoy the video. But if you look at Harry's historical marker in Iota, you can actually Google it, like Harry Burn grave. You'll see his historical marker. It's a gray plaque on a post by the road.
Oh, good.
I knew it when I was a kid. I knew that he was in the state senate. He was a delegate to a convention on the state planning commission, blah, blah, blah. I didn't know anything about that when I was 12 years old. Well, there's a lot to that. This career of his is just getting started, and he's never going to top enfranchising half the country again, no doubt. But he continued on in Tennessee public service doing some remarkable things, and no one had ever dug into that until I did my research starting 3 years ago. So he was in the state senate. Excuse me. He doesn't even go to law school. He studies for the bar and passes it in 1923 and practices law for a little while. He runs for governor in 1930 and unfortunately doesn't even come close to winning. That's a really good chapter to get into his political philosophy. And then he serves in the state senate from 1949 to 1953, representing, of course, Southeast Tennessee. And then he's president of the First National Bank in Rockwood, Tennessee, which is about 30 minutes west of Knoxville, because Lenoir City's southwest of Knoxville, just pretty much right there on the county line, but Rockwood's about 30 minutes west. So he got into banking, and then he's on state planning commission for 18 years, where they're doing a lot of things the government, is supposed to be doing rather than overregulating everything. They're actually worried about the government's duties when it comes to infrastructure, roads, bridges, tunnels, waterways, schools, voter registration, things like that. It wasn't even a paid position. He went to Nashville 4 times a year for meetings. He did some research, things like that, which I really thought was interesting. And then on the very bottom, you'll see he was a delegate to 4 conventions to change the Tennessee Constitution. Now, when I was 12, I didn't know Tennessee had a constitution. And I was really interested to learn about what all went into this. And come to find out, Tennessee's Constitution in 1953, that first one he went to, it was the longest unamended constitution in the entire country. Hadn't been changed since 1870. Tennessee changed it to pretty much outlaw slavery and then, install all their segregation stuff, So it's not only is it obviously racist, but it's archaic. So much of the stuff that may have been a good idea in the 1870s, so outdated now. So Harry's there to help improve Tennessee's Constitution. And he went all the way to the 1970s in politics. And notice, he's not in office, for such a long time, one of those guys that wouldn't go away. And I use this example to offend both parties, but you had John McCain, you had Ted Kennedy, you had Robert Byrd, you had Strom Thurmond. Those guys were in office, for 50 years. Decades. Harry went in and out of office and different things. I really admired that. He wasn't really a career politician. He was a politician. He had his times where he put his foot in his mouth and, got a big ego, but at least he went away every now and then, So now on to the next slide. Is that the did you know?
Yes.
Okay, well, I never knew until I did my research. He voted for not 1, not 2, but 3 federal amendments to the Constitution. I mean, how many legislators can say they do that? And I tell this to my students, this isn't the Constitution of the United States. It's not supposed to be changed by, 5-4 Supreme Court decisions or by an executive order by the president, which is going to be expired or the next president comes in, or it's supposed to be changed with the Article 5 amendment process. It's supposed to be difficult, and it's not the judges doing it, it's not the president doing it. It's the Congress and the states are the ones voting on this. And Harry knew that, and he pushed to lower Tennessee's voting age. He was actually president of an organization called Vote at 18, which President Eisenhower actually expressed support for during the Korean War, because you had all these people drafted into the war at 18 and they couldn't even vote. And he didn't succeed in having that happen in Tennessee, but he did live to see the 26th Amendment ratified in 1971, I believe it was, when he was a few years from his passing, and he was really happy to live to see that. And there was a lot of election fraud in Southeast Tennessee at that time. If you guys are interested, you can look up the Battle of Athens. Of course, that's in McMinn County, Harry's home county. And there's a new book coming out about it called The Fighting Bunch. It comes out in November, actually on Election Day, and it's about some of the worst election corruption in the country's history. And Harry wasn't even able to get back into politics until this machine was overthrown in his county, and he wrote a lot of election reform laws to make sure we had clean elections in Tennessee, because it was just horrible around here. Of course, thankfully now it's virtually non-existent, but back then it was really bad. And then also I think I have on there that something about gerrymandering. Okay, this blew my mind. Are there any history, political science nerds? I'm sure there are some there, professors in the audience like me, or teachers, who know about Baker versus Carr. Well, it's a top 10 landmark Supreme Court case from the 20th century, and it was right up there with Brown v. Board and everything else like that. Matt v. Ohio, what's the Miranda versus Arizona, all that kind of stuff. Well, Tennessee, like a lot of states, their legislative districts were not equally apportioned. You had like a rural district with maybe 50,000 people with one representative, and you had an urban district, let's say downtown Memphis, with 100,000 people, 150,000 people, and their representatives' vote is the same weight as the rural guys' vote, with 1/3 the population. It's not even. And Tennessee ignored that for decades. They didn't apportion their districts properly, and it was skewed to the rural area, and it wasn't really even a party thing. Of course, back then it was Solid South, all Democratic, but it was really more of an urban versus rural thing. That we know a lot of African Americans lived in the cities back then. They didn't want them to be able to have a lot of political power, and they had the agricultural guys versus the city guys. And Harry said, "Look, we need to pass a bill to change this," and they didn't do it for years. And finally, the Supreme Court intervenes. Well, there's a case brought to them, and they rule that you have to have one person, one vote. You have to have these legislative districts even. So in addition to the gerrymandering we see in the United States Congress, which is more along party lines, or to protect incumbents, this was just not fair. You had underrepresented districts and overrepresented districts. So Harry actually played a role in that, which is just crazy to think. So a really interesting career that went on to the 70s, which I think people would enjoy reading about in the book. And I think I have the book on the next slide, don't I?
Yep. There you go. ArcadiaPublishing.com.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So ArcadiaPublishing.com.
Directly from the author. So he.
Yes.
Yes.
If you guys will want to have me personally sign a copy, just email me at that email address. I set that website up a couple months ago. I'll be happy to sign it for you and ship it to you. The shipping will be, of course, more than it would be coming from Arcadia or Amazon, but you get a signed book from me. So there you go, and so you can contact me there. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I apologize again for the technical errors. So.
Oh, thank you very much. This is really, and I can't recommend the book strongly enough. We've really enjoyed it here in the office. We're so glad we found it. I'm trying to remember how we did find out about this. But I know I bought the book about 2 months ago and said, we got to get him as a speaker. So we're just so happy that you were able to join us. And thank you for your heroic efforts to get back online when you were bounced off. Comments here about thanks for persevering through the technical issues.
Yeah, that's been the story of 2020. And the video, if you guys don't mind, I think that she can play the video. This is a great way to end it, because Harry in 1970 was 75 years old, and he's like my papaw. He didn't look his age because he kind of got chubby, and he didn't lose a lot of hair, so he looked younger than he really was. His skin was too fat to wrinkle, I think, but he aged pretty well. And he was shocked to the end. He died of an unexpected heart attack. Well, they're doing all the 50-year celebration like we've been doing for 100 years, and they got him on the local news. And this guy frames this interview like gave women the right to vote. And, of course, they did that back then, for expediency. Everyone knows it wasn't given. But Harry answers it in a really unusual way, like just the way he talks. It's like he's trying to sound sophisticated, but then he tells a story, and it's really, really good. And I think you'll love the last line. It always makes you laugh. So hope you guys enjoy the video. And I might actually be able to, you think I might be able to hear it on here if I stay on?
Please, yeah. All right, let's see.
Okay, go ahead and play it. But
Harry, this article says that you are the father of women's suffrage. What is that all about?
Well, that's the first time I've ever been so designated. It's the first time I've ever heard the words expressed in that particular manner. I had always been given credit, of course, properly so, for having cast the deciding vote that gave women the right to vote.
Are you a member of the legislature in 1918?
I was elected in 1918. I served in the regular session of 19 and 19, and this was a special session in August 19 and 20, near the end of my first term.
Now, what did you do to give the women in this country the right to vote?
Well, it took 36 states then to amend the federal constitution. There were 48 states, and 35 had already ratified. And they began a drive to try to get a 36th state, and they prevailed on Governor Albert Roberts of Tennessee to call a special session of the legislature. It was called in early August 19 and 20. And the state Senate passed the resolution, well, say 3 or 4 to 1, overwhelmingly. It came on over to the House. They first thought that the House would pass it maybe by a 5 or 10 vote majority, but there was hundreds and almost thousands of lobbyists around Nashville from all over the United States because it was a national question. And I had left Nowda, my farm, and where my mother lived, to going to Nashville planning to vote for women's suffrage. But after I got over there, my political advisors, the elderly statesmen in McMinn County, suggested we ought to let it go over till January, the regular session.
Then it was actually your deciding vote and your work that passed the amendment?
Yes, they made a motion to table, the opposition did, and I was willing to let this go till the January session, so I voted to table. And the vote was 48 to 48, a tie.
Tell me, Harry, are you happy now that
Yes, I've been asked that question 10,000 times, and I've always been glad to answer yes. I've always been glad I did.
well, there you go. No regret. 50 years later.
So he voted to table, but then it didn't get tabled, right? And the next day.
Yeah, it was a tie, so they couldn't table it without a majority.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very, very much. We have a question here about was this?
Sure.
And yes, it was. And if you registered for the program, you will get a link within the next few days. It doesn't come immediately. It takes a few days for the technology to work. So, but Tyler, I can't thank you enough for working so hard for this. And I urge everyone to buy a copy of this book. It's a good read and you'll enjoy it, and order it from Tyler at harrytburn.com, right?
Yes, and if you don't mind, I've got a few minutes if you want to ask a few questions. That's okay.
Oh, let's see if we have questions.
Okay.
There was one. Oh, what else is known about Febb? How long did she live? What else do you know about her? Did she live very long?
Well, if I had started this research when I was in high school, I could have asked my grandfather Burn about her, and of course I could have asked some other Nowda elders, but didn't think of it, unfortunately. And I tried to find folks who knew her, and everyone that knew her who's still living, they're in their 90s, and they were little kids when they met her. But
Yeah.
She loved the farm life. She worked as a teacher for a while, but she loved working on the farm. And after she became famous for being mother to save suffrage, she just continued working on her farm, and she joined the DAR, Dawes American Revolution, and got bit by the genealogy bug and helped me out with my chapter 1 of my book, as you'll find out. And she was highly respected around town, and a devout Methodist, actually. And she passed away in 1945. She didn't live terribly long. She was 71. She had a lot of heart problems, and my grandfather Burn was actually serving in the Pacific during World War II on a destroyer when she died. He missed the funeral, unfortunately. But people that knew her all said she was just a very gracious, kind, hospitable person who loved the farm life, and she didn't do a lot of activism, things like that, But if you ever did bring up a subject around her, she did not hesitate to share her views. She was unashamed of what she believed in, and she had a very, very large personality, as they say. So my uncle says large. So
Right, right. That's very interesting. I think that was the main question. I'm trying to, what Harry's mother wrote to him has been an ongoing mystery. Yeah. I'm just making sure I haven't missed any.
Okay.
Oh, there is one at the top. Teen Tell is spurring me on. Sorry, I'm missing it. It's in the top of questions or chat. Oh, questions. Sorry, I'm in the chat. Oh, are you aware if Harry ever took a position on the Equal Rights Amendment?
Yes, he did. That's in chapter 14 in my book. I actually stumbled on that in my research. I wasn't looking for it, but when you have newspapers.com, you can type in anything you want, it'll come up. But Harry was 79, I think, at the time, and of course he was an attorney. And he came down against the Equal Rights Amendment, and I was curious to learn his reasoning on that. And I found 3 or 4 articles where he talked about it, and he said, I don't believe that, and again, this gets into the way he tried to sound sophisticated all the time. He said, I don't believe that all of the current protections under the law for women should be abrogated or repealed. I mean, he used the word like abrogated, only he would. And he also said that I believe that the amendment is unnecessary. He said something about unnecessary because it would be a great loss to the existing rights of women. He said something about how Pennsylvania had a state level ERA law that had a lot of drawbacks. He thought it would start a legal quagmire. And of course, with him being an attorney, there's no telling what he was thinking there. But he said, if it would broaden the base of political equality, I would support it. And if I had to take a guess, of course, this is, pure conjecture on my part. And of course, this is 50 years ago when he was saying this, but I think he was probably thinking about, when he uses the words like political equality, he's probably thinking, okay, is this going to be about people being treated equally by the government under the law? Or is this going to be more about getting involved in a lot of private organizations and businesses and things like that? So he may have come down on the side of like, this business here may be perceived as discriminatory, and maybe it was, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it just kind of comes off looking that way. Mm-hmm. He didn't want them to get litigated for it. I don't know. That's something I can think of.
Right.
But he came down against it. And I looked at a lot of the other reasonings a lot of other people like Phyllis Shapley used.
Right.
And he wasn't talking about anything like, women will be drafted into combat, they're going to lose their alimony, and they're going to, all that. He didn't really say anything like that. He was thinking about it more from like what's it's going to do to our legal system and political equality. So I think he had some much more, I guess, much less annoying, reasons to oppose than someone like Shapley did. But that was a crazy time, anyways, with Vietnam going on, pushing that off, like that. So, but he came down against that. So.
Yeah. And then back in 1920, Joanne Callahan, our friend from Garland, Texas, asked if Anita Palliser was involved with Harry deciding to change his vote. And there is a picture in the book, the famous picture of steps, and he's shaking hands with Anita Palliser, who was a very active National Women's Party member. Did you? I was scanning around these pages just to see if you mention her, and I'm not sure that is she here?
Yeah, she's actually my index.
Yeah, I'm looking.
She's in. I think I mentioned her at the very end too, because there's a second television program I can recommend you guys. Nashville Public Television, the PBS affiliate, they did a program last year called "By One Vote, Women's Suffrage in the South," and it's available on YouTube. Just type in "By One Vote, Women's Suffrage" or "By One Vote," in Nashville. They have footage of Harry from 1961. He was on national television with Walter Cronkite, and they got the rights to that. from CBS in Los Angeles. I couldn't do that, but they could. They're the State Museum helped them out. But I learned that Anita Pulitzer, I'll probably get her name wrong. I don't know if it's Pulitzer or like the Pulitzer Prize. But,
no, Pulitzer. Pulitzer.
Pulitzer. Okay, well, Anita Pulitzer, she was interviewed for that program too.
Right.
And I do know that it seemed like it was well, I know she went to Athens. She wanted to meet Harry before the session started, like July 1920. She went to Athens, and a few miles from Niota, and she met with the party chairman. And right in her presence, they said, "Oh, we're going to call Burn. We'll call him for you. And are you going to vote for the amendment? Are you a yes or no?" He goes, "Oh, don't worry, he'll vote for it." And I hung up the phone. So she marked him down as a sort of a, not really a strong yes, but like a leans yes, I guess. So when she notices he's wearing the red rose during the special session and he's hanging out with all the anti-suffrage people, she meets with him, I think the night before the vote, and that's when he told her, because this is in a book about Alice Paul called The Story of Alice Paul and the National Women's Party. He says, "I can't commit myself to you right now, but I'll do nothing to hurt you." And if that's not a politician answering you, I don't know what is. I mean, he's just trying to make everybody happy, trying to talk out of both sides of his mouth and bury his head in the sand and ride out the storm. But in reality, it's how it worked out. He wanted to table it. It didn't work out, so he didn't hurt him, and he voted yes. And she was in the picture. One of the most famous pictures of him is the one of him shaking hands on the steps of the Capitol. Sue Shelton White's in the picture, and so is I think Betty Graham and Banks Turner, who was another one of the suffragettes, as they called them. And Harry is upper right, shaking hands with Anita Pulitzer. And if you look at his left jacket pocket, you can see a lot of letters in there, including his mother's letter. So,
okay.
So that worked out pretty good for Anita Pulitzer. She played a very important role. So.
Right. Yeah. Someone else asked, did Febb vote in 1920?
Yes, I'm glad you asked me that. She got the first voter registration card in McMinn County because the October voter registration period for October 1920, that was when all the women in McMinn County, of course, all over the country, but in Tennessee, registered to vote for the first time. And there were some that had voted in 1919 because Tennessee had a limited suffrage bill, but there was no election for president that year. Obviously, you could only vote for mayor, and she didn't live in Athens, so there wasn't a mayor's race in Niota. So she couldn't even register to vote until October 1920 when she was almost 47 years old. She got voter registration card number 1. And it says they didn't have time to change all the papers, all the ballot or the cards, registration cards. So it says his number is 1, his civil district is 4, his race is white, all of it's, male pronouns. So they had to hand all this out to the women. But she got to go vote for the first time in November 1920. So
that's great. That's a good story.
So late in life. Back then, 47 is not as young as it is now. But yeah, she got to vote, thankfully. So, and I'm sure she voted all the way till she passed away. I know, for sure. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, we want to say thank you very, very much for a really nice presentation, and congratulations on a really fun book. This is great, and good luck on your next one.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Glad to hear that, and I'll keep you all posted on that. So thanks again for the invitation. Have a good night.
All right, and thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. And please come back next time. This technology is not going to be any problem, I promise. But we will be meeting on October 10th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time with All Stirred Up. So we hope you can join us then. Thanks again, everyone, and good night.